Harry S. Truman, the 33rd President of the United States of America, had said, "Selfishness and greed, individual or national, causes most of our troubles." No wonder the man served both the terms in office. Greed and selfishness have for long been the root cause of immense hatred in this world and disruption of societies and lives. And so, once upon a time, Rustom Baba. Yes, Baba was his surname, and not the general suffix attached randomly in the country in a random fashion to random people. But I shall not get into the various uses of the word Baba, because that is the furthest from the sordid tale that unfolds here today. A gentleman of Parsi origin, Rustom Baba, was a detective that detectives sought out for assistance. It was another matter that he did not remember their names or anything else that was relevant but the case at hand. When Ruby Singh, his neighbor and assistant, tried to look for him, she knew it had to be in an odd spot, but even she was not ready for what she saw. Rustom Baba sat under the wash basin in the bathroom. He had a far-away look in his eyes. It seemed he was trying to calculate something on his fingers. "Rustom, why are you sitting here?" Rustom looked at her, or he looked through her. One would never know. "The Mehta boy, is he here to see me?" he asked blankly. "How do you know?" Ruby was ready to hear some cunning deduction he had made sitting under the wash basin to arrive at the conclusion that a new client that he had never heard of had come to see him. "I saw it on the news that his father died of a heart attack and there's a major property dispute in the family. So obviously someone suspects murder. No great detection involved there." Rustom pushed Ruby aside and walked out of the bathroom. Ruby followed him out and found a wet towel lying on a chair. Trust Rustom to put the towel where he belonged and put himself where the towel belonged. "When did he pass away?" Rustom asked Fennel Mehta, the scion of the Mehta Empire. "Last night," Fennel replied. "And you think it is murder?" Fennel nodded in response. Rustom asked Fennel if he could visit the house and carry out a search. Fennel was more than happy to arrange that. Rustom and Ruby walked through the hallowed halls of the rich. Rustom checked Trilok Mehta's room. How strange it was that the man was gone, but there were pieces of him everywhere. Ruby noticed that Rustom spent a long time studying Trilok's medicine as they lay on his bedside table. Then he looked at Fennel and asked him 2 questions. Did his father have any muscular pain? And did he indeed die of a heart attack? Fennel replied in the affirmative to both his questions. Rustom walked up to Fennel and peered over his reading glasses. "If he died of a heart attack, then how are you so sure it's murder?" "My stepmother, my sister, my older brother, everyone was fighting for the estate and your father got a heart attack? Could it be that you're just looking for someone to blame for your grief? A heart attack is a heart attack after all," Rustom reasoned. Fennel nodded, sad, but there was something about his sadness that moved Rustom. Can you show me the main trash can of the house? That's where secrets usually lie, Rustom said with half a smile. A pair of surgical gloves later, Rustom rummaged through the waste, like a dog looking for scraps of food. Then he picked up a small bottle, like an eye drop, and turned to Fennel. Who smokes in this house? Fennel shook his head and said, No one. Rustom took a deep breath and then whispered slowly, It is murder. The first thing I would ask you to do is cancel your father's funeral and be ready to have an autopsy if the need arises. Are you ready for that? Rustom asked Fennel, once again observing him closely over his glasses. That would create a furore in the family. Fennel was clearly concerned. We either get to the bottom of it or not. The choice is yours, Mr. Mehta. Fennel took a deep breath and then nodded slowly. Rustom smiled at him encouragingly. I would like to meet all your family members. And Ruby mentioned that there were 2 nurses that took care of your father. I would like to meet them as well. I shall arrange that, Fennel said with a certain amount of finality and determination. Later, as they sat playing a game of carom, Ruby asked Rustom what were his thoughts. I think the most important decision in the game of carom is when to decide to pocket the red coin, Rustom said as he pocketed the red coin with full concentration. Ruby realized it was pointless probing further. Ah, from Sikkim, did you say? Rustom asked the day nurse. The day nurse replied in the affirmative. And then to the night nurse, about 12 miles from Nellore in Andhra Pradesh. It's a small place, you would not know, the night nurse said, responding to Rustom's query. Rustom nodded and gestured to Ruby to make a note. Now, Rustom and Ruby sat in Fennel's older brother's office chamber. So you say that this is not your father's first heart attack, Ruby posed this time. No, he had 2 before. He was ailing, it was a matter of time. Rustom, in the meanwhile, was lost, looking at pictures of various gods on his desk. You are a religious man, Mr. Mehta? Rustom interjected. Sometimes, said Fennel's older brother, smiling elegantly. You were married to Mr. Mehta, but you did not sleep in the same room as him, Rustom asked Nina Mehta, Fennel's stepmother. Well, he was ill and the nurse would be there day and night. Did not seem there was much privacy in any case. Rustom glanced at Ruby to catch her disapprove with her trademark disapproving frown. I had just gotten from Paris last night. Had been there for the past 1 month, testified the stepbrother. Rustom had what he needed. He marched up to Fennel Mehta and on a piece of paper gave him the name of the murderer and the modus operandi. Rustom was far more interested in figuring the 6-letter word for angst in the crossword the next day. But Ruby insisted he tell her the how and why of the Mehta case. Just then, the television announced that Trilok Mehta, Fennel's older brother, and the night nurse had been arrested for the murder of Mr. Mehta. They also credited Rustom Baba with solving the case. Ruby turned to look at Rustom in shock. Rustom knew he had to explain. He put the crossword aside. When we first visited the Mehta house, I found some medicines on Mehta's bedside table. Amongst them was a tube of ointment that had been opened from the bottom, like tampered with, like someone had put something in the tube. Next, I found a bottle of E-liquid in the trash. The liquid is used in electronic cigarettes. It's concentrated nicotine. And add to it, no one smoked in the house. Odd? I knew that the nicotine was the culprit. Rustom grew a tad excited as he revisited the case. He stood up and began to pace the room. The night nurse came from Nellore. Nellore is famous for tobacco plantations, and a common illness that strikes people who work these plantations is called green tobacco sickness. Inexperienced harvesters would be in constant contact with the wet nicotine, and that would enter the bloodstream through the skin and make them ill. The nurse from Nellore had to know that. Next, when we visited the Mehta boy in the office, I saw the depictions of Lord Mallikarjuna and Goddess Kamakshi among the other gods that he had. These deities are rare, and the temples are in the same town, 12 kilometers from Nellore. So you do the math, Ruby. Ruby began to piece it all together. You mean the night nurse put the liquid in the ointment tube and applied it as a muscle relaxant? The nicotine gave this tingling feeling of a muscle relaxant. The unnaturally high amounts of nicotine that seeped in impacted Mr. Mehta's heart. It gave him a heart attack. Oh my God! The sun and the night nurse really had it going. Rustom nodded slightly. Money is a strange thing. It turns sons against fathers. Misery, whispered Ruby. What? The 6-letter word for angst, Ruby said with a sigh.